A very warm welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And we're all here because we've got two common things. We work in compliance, we work in financial crime, or we are super passionate about diversity and inclusion. And we've got a combination of two amazing ingredients, and hopefully we will make that sing by the end of today. So a little bit of housekeeping before we get started, and we just introduce our amazing panel in just a moment. There isn't a fire alarm expected. So if one happens, follow me out the door because I will be the first out the door. There are facilities or the restrooms or the washrooms are just through there. There is a red light, but it's not activated, so you can just go on the outside. And of course, please help yourself to any refreshments during the event. Post this panel that we're going to have in a moment. There's going to be some refreshments and some food available as well. So please do stick around afterwards because I am going to set everybody a task before we do break for that refreshment at the end as well. So, and this is where it's already gone wrong because I need my clicker. But we've got an hour with an amazing panel. So, while we've got an amazing panel to talk about a really topical issue in the world of compliance, actually this session's more about you guys. Okay, so we don't want to sit here, and there's going to be some amazing conversations go out. We've met a few times, and I'm really excited for everyone to hear the views of some really senior, important individuals in the compliance space. But this is your time, and by that, what I mean is that we want to make this interactive. So to do that, we've got a couple of ways. But what I do appreciate, this is a sensitive topic. Sometimes we've got really strong views we want to share, and that's totally okay, as long as we're being respectful and we're thoughtful to each other's opinions. Sometimes we've got a view, but maybe we're just not comfortable in expressing that. So what we've tried to do is express a couple of different ways for you to be able to do that. So Matt, who I'm going to introduce in a moment as one of our co-hosts, he has a microphone and he's going to be able to wander around. Everybody knows what a microphone looks like, which is good to be on the same page. So Matt will be able to come to you with that microphone. And the reason we're using the microphone is that this event is going to be recorded and disseminated to reach the wider compliance community as well. So if you have got a point, raise your hand. Just give us a moment for Matt to get across. But if you're not comfortable in speaking, first thing I will say is that's okay. Nobody's here to judge. We're all here for one common reason, which is why we have our slider. So just so we can all get on the same page, make sure the technology is working, what I would ask everybody to do is take out your phones. And this is a bit strange, isn't it? Being back in person and being told to take out your phone as opposed to put it away. But it's 2022, we move with the times. And what we have is a QR code on the screen. And I'm told, even from the back, you can scan that QR code. But if you can't, go to slido.com. And when it's taken you there, it will ask you to enter a hashtag. And that hashtag is diversity in compliance, which you can see on the bottom right of the screen. So why are we using this? Well, I've already said it's to provide an element of anonymity, but give you a platform to have your voices heard. But we are going to launch some polls throughout today, because the whole idea is that we leave today not necessarily better in the world of diversity and inclusion, but maybe we want to go back to our places of work and ask more questions, and that's what this is all about. But there might be some difficult subjects that you want to put to our panel that you can do in an anonymous format. My only request is please be respectful with the questions that go on there. So hopefully everybody's been able to access that okay. I've had one thumbs up. Everybody good? Yep. 2, 3, lots of thumbs up. Excellent. So please use that, and we'll explain when polls are deployed, but at any point you can put a question on there. You can upvote it if you want it to be topical, and we will put that to our panel. Alternatively, please put your hand up and we will make sure that you're able to answer that question. So a little bit of overview on the agenda. We are going to keep introductions really brief because this isn't an ego massaging session. This is here to talk about a really important point. And then following this event, there is going to be networking. I would really welcome you all to stay, have a soft drink, an alcoholic drink. There'll be some food arriving as well. And you will be tasked with something, so please don't forget about that as well. So before I pass over to Matt, I just want to introduce myself. Now, I know I've met one or two of you already. We've already had some engagement, but I'm James. I'm the global lead for anti-money laundering and sanctions compliance here at the ICA. So when I'm not catching terrorists or trying to put naughty people back in sanctioned boxes, I'm very passionate about this subject. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague and fellow co-host, Matt, to briefly introduce himself and Broadgate, and then we'll move on with the session.
Thank you, James. So there are some familiar faces here this evening, but if you don't know me, my name's Matt. I'm a director at Broadgate. Broadgate are a part of the Chinovo Group. So Broadgate, what do? We specialise in risk and compliance and legal recruitment As well as that, information, cyber security as well, and accounting and finance. And that's across the UK, Europe, and the US. That's me. I'm going to be roaming around with the mic. If you've got some questions, like James says, put your hand up. So that's a brief introduction to Broadgate.
Action for Kids.
Oh, so, Matt, before I play the video, would you like to introduce our charitable partners for the evening?
Absolutely. So I'm now going to pass over to Lynn, who is from AFK, which is our charitable partner for this evening.
Thank you. And Maya, of course. Come on, keep me company. Thank you for having us. Obviously, thank you to Trenovo Broadgate for choosing us as their charity partner. We're here because there are some really shocking and sad stats about inclusion in the workplace, inclusion for healthcare, access to education. And there are huge barriers for disabled young people, learning disabled, physical disabilities and autism, to receiving appropriate equipment, to receiving good education, good employment support, careers pathways, careers insight. So what we do, and you'll see a little bit more from the film and meet some of the young people we work with all the time, is we provide specialist mobility equipment, and that's for children from birth up to 25 all around the UK. But in London, we provide some really exciting and innovative and very holistic programs that support disabled children and young people with their skills, their aspirations, their access to employment. So I'm Lynn, I'm the Corporate Partnerships Manager, and I'm really lucky. I work for an incredible charity, and I'm a fundraiser because all the work we do is voluntary funded, so I'm a fundraiser at heart. But fortunately, I also get to work with all our lovely employee volunteers, and a big part of my work is introducing employers to young people that can work with them, and that's why I want to introduce you to Maya as well, to just tell you a little bit about the work she does.
Thank you. I'll be very quick. So I'm Maya. I'm a job coach and employment broker at AFK, and I work with 18 to 25-year-olds. Predominantly the people I work with are people with a learning disability and or autism, and my aim is to get them into work, paid work hopefully, but sometimes it's voluntary work and training, but the majority of the young people we work with, we get them into paid work. And as I know I've been talking to some of you already, but part of that is also working with employers and getting them just to think a little bit differently about what their recruitment needs are, what they're actually looking for somebody when they enforce, what they're looking from somebody when they put a job out. So it's an equal balance of working with the young people who want a job and the employers who are looking to employ somebody. That's what we do in a nutshell. There you go.
So obviously there's a lot of things we're working on with the team at Trenovo. We've got people running marathons, jumping out of planes, this and the other. And yes, they're going to be tough times for our young people the next few months. And I know they're going to be tough times for people to give. So I've got on a little challenge as well tonight as well. So I've also got a QR code. And all I need people to do is scan this code and register. And we get £1 for everyone who registers tonight, which is brilliant. And all it is, it's an online shopping platform, so you know the things that give you cash back. This gives cash back to AFK. So I'm not asking you to do anything, give. I'm not asking you to jump out of a plane or run a marathon. But if you could just download this little code here and register tonight. How many people got in here? Let's raise 50 quid just by doing that. That would be brilliant. Use 3 email addresses if you want. It's fine by me.
We are a financial crime and compliance, you know. Just so we are above board. Yeah, okay. If you say so. All right, so crime does pay, but in the right way. So okay, that's okay.
But yeah, I would ask you to do that, and it's not asking you to shop more or anything, but it's asking you when you do shop, if you're shopping online, groceries, Christmas shopping. Yes, Christmas shopping. It's a big way to raise money for charity. So yes, I would like to show you the film, and you'll really see the difference we're making.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Action for Kids is celebrating 30 years of creating opportunities for children and young people with disabilities and autism. It all started in 1991 when Sally Bishop decided to raise money for her neighbour's disabled son. He needed a powered wheelchair the National Health Service couldn't provide. Since then, the journey has been onwards and upwards. Over the past 30 years, Action for Kids has supported thousands of young people to reach their full potential by providing employment support and mobility equipment. I started work experience back in '97. Action for Kids has helped me out a lot in regards to giving me the ability to be independent. So Action for Kids has provided me at least 2 wheelchairs. Without their assistance to get these expensive wheelchairs, I wouldn't have been able to do half of the things I've done. So I'm very thankful for the service and for the staff that has assisted the process. Being a disabled person, aiming to be independent, learning to get employment, it's not usually a thing disabled people get that much assistance with. So alongside getting wheelchairs, which helped me be independent on the street, when it came to employment, that was another side of assistance that helped me to be independent on a more financial level. So I think primarily on the most simplest human level, it gives a person confidence to have self-worth, that they can go and do something for themselves, to keep pushing forward regardless of the negatives that you're potentially going to face.
I've been at AFK since 1997.
What difference has AFK made to your life?
I've met lots of nice people here. And for about 22 years I've been doing the raffle system. I wasn't planning to stay this long. Then we run a mobility service. Because some mobility service you can't get on National Health Service. They also do lots of training to do office jobs here, basically. One of the training they do, travel training, how to get around. It's how to travel on buses and stuff. It's probably better than being at home. They have new lives.
Can you tell us about your journey with AFK?
How did I get involved? In January 1999, I started as a student myself, and in 2004, I got a part-time job as a chaperone. I worked at AFK for 17 years. I can say AFK has helped me a very lot. They helped me get into my own place, get out of my parents' flat, and get into a supported living. Some people might treat us different because of our learning disabilities, and it's quite important to be treated in the same way, to socialise and get the skills.
And what's your favourite memory from AFK?
The definite Christmas parties, because we used to put a performance on. Now I've got a new job as a care assistant, and I helping other people that needs my support, and I'm really enjoying my new role.
How do you think AFK has helped you?
By getting me into paid work. I feel that they've changed my life as well. When I first got this job, it felt really good. I'm happy coming to work, and I've been doing this job since 2016, and I'm still doing it now, here in 2022. It's a permanent job. If we need more milk, I have to bring more milk up and I have to fill up the stationery so that there's enough felt tips, pens and rulers for everybody to use. And also as well, if there's food, I bring up the food, and I have to fill up the coffee beans as well so that they can have coffee as well as tea.
What is your favourite memory from AFK?
Going beach volleyball, because it was like a get-together kind of thing, and also the feel of the atmosphere was very good.
Define AFK in one word.
Brilliant.
Amazing.
To independent.
I feel safe here.
Happy 30th anniversary.
I wish everyone a happy 30th birthday.
Happy 30th birthday, AFK.
Happy 30th anniversary. Hope there's many more. Here's to another 30 years.
Let's give that a round of applause. That was incredible. Is it me, or has it just got like really hot in here all of a sudden? But what an amazing charity, and it's great to make use of an event like this and collaboration to be able to promote something like that. So let's do our bit legitimately with one email address, of course. So
Friends and family.
that's better. Now we can work with that. But we'll keep this code on over the break at the end for us to be able to donate if you wish to do so, but it sounds like we've got an opportunity. So, on to the main event. Through rain, snow, sun, thunder, anything else, Paul?
No,
London buses, I think we saw. But I think most of us know who we are at the ICA. Look, we're an education firm. We're about financial crime and education. But I'm going to move on for that. We don't want to talk about that, do we? We want to move on to our amazing panel. So if I could ask our panel to introduce themselves, and then we're going to move on. And I'm going to ask for a volunteer for the first really, really difficult question. So, Paul, can I come to yourself as my
I'll
first?
try and be quick. So I'm Paul Archer. I lead on compliance at Virgin Media 2. The reason why I'm here is because I recognise my role as a senior person of colour in terms of talking about diversity and inclusion. And to be frank, it's not something I've thought about all my life. I'm 45 years of age. I have not woken up every single day thinking about diversity and inclusion. I have not. But I think over the past 7 years in particular, I've got 2 younger daughters. I probably understood a bit more about myself, understood a bit more about the challenges I've had, which I've probably just forgotten. And I think I've been able to relinquish the burden on my back by just being more honest about my background, about my culture, about my experiences. And by sharing my story, I think members of my team have been able to empathise with that. I've been able to drive a culture across Virgin Media 2, and I'm really proud to be part of the conversation now. And as James said, I think the more honest we can be in this conversation, and the more curious we can be, the better and richer conversation we can have across the compliance community.
Paul is an ICA celebrity. He was our first member of the year as well, weren't you, Paul? So thought I'd drop that one in there just so for the selfie opportunity at the end. But thanks, Paul. What a pleasure to have you here. Jenny.
Hi everyone, so I'm Jenny Hines, I'm from the Clear Company, so I think I'm probably the only person in the room who's not a compliance expert, possibly with the exception of these ladies here. So my background is very much embedded in the diversity and inclusion space, and at the Clear Company we work with a wide range of global organisations across the whole diversity and inclusion agenda, so really pleased to be here today and happy to answer any questions that people have got kind of around diversity and inclusion, so thank you for having me.
Amazing, thanks Jenny. Kalisa.
Hi everyone, my name's Kalisa. So I work at Crew at the minute. I've been in compliance for the last 10 years. And my diversity and inclusion journey probably started officially only in 2020. But I would say that before that, something that always stuck with me was that I was told when I was a child at school that, injustice really does affect me. Because I would speak up about things that I thought were not particularly right. And so, when things happened in 2020, I was quite instrumental in getting our diversity and inclusion group going within my firm at the time. I've only been at Crew for the last 2 months. But I'm happy to say that I am also now on the inclusion committee at Crew that has also just begun. So, really ready to go.
And you are an ICA celebrity as well, aren't you, Kalisa? Would you like to tell everybody why? Because this is recorded forever on the internet, like we said earlier.
I won the first annual Diversity and Inclusion Champion of the Year in the compliance space. So, that's
a round of applause, surely. What an amazing achievement that was. Well done.
Same for Paul as well.
Thank you. And finally, Amy.
Hello, I'm Amy Bell. I'm a director of a business called TL Compliance. We help lawyers with all the rules and the regulations that they have to follow. I'm best known in the legal sector for my work in anti-money laundering. I'm the current chair of the Law Society's Money Laundering Task Force, which sounds much more exciting than it is, but means that I get to go to those conversations, government and used to be Europe, not so much anymore. But I'm an unlikely person, I think, if you look at my background, unlikely to become a solicitor in the first place. Unlike a lot of solicitors, didn't have a professional, no accountants, no solicitors. The first solicitor I met was probably someone who came across in a custody battle when I was a kid. It wasn't a normal kind of lead-in. I got a 2-2 from a former polytechnic. Because of probably learning difficulties that I didn't discover till much later on in my life. And I now work with many different sizes of law firms, big ones, little ones, medium ones. I have been involved in my career in graduate recruitment into large law firms, and I'm incredibly passionate about not just the disability and inclusion but also the social mobility and the challenges that people have if they don't know what to say, who to say it to. The amount of people that have come across my desk as potential work experience or trainee solicitors who have not been able to shake hands satisfactorily with people meant that they weren't able to get further on in their application process. That's luck that you know how to do that. So I'm quite passionate about addressing that.
Perfect. And Amy and I have spent a lot of time talking about mental health as well, which we'll bring to this conversation. We are fellow Northerners, so we kind of stick together. We have to. So my question is, who wants to tackle the hard question first of all? Who's going to be brave to take that one?
I don't mind, but,
Nice delegation, Paul. I like it.
I don't mind.
All right, cool. Paul, you're going to take this one. So, what was the last thing you watched on Netflix?
Good question.
Microphone.
I don't massively like telly. So it's a really boring answer. We should have planned that.
Yeah, that was the idea, not to take the sting out, Paul. You should have made something up like Narcos or something that we would all relate to.
Underground Railroad on Amazon Prime.
Right, there we go. So,
which is amazing.
So that's our first recommendation. Jenny?
I'm afraid to say that I'm re-watching Friends with my 14-year-old daughter at the moment. So
well, we are at a diverse event. It's okay. It's fine. Kalisa?
I literally have Friends on every day.
Okay, perfect. Amy?
So I can't remember the last thing on Netflix, but the last thing I've watched was Below Deck on Now TV.
So this is what our compliance leaders or senior leaders watch. Anyway, joking aside, we'll take off the sting a little bit. But Paul, I may come to you if I can. Diversity and inclusion in teams, in compliance, why is it important?
Look, I think that having difference of opinion is really important for any commercial organisation, but also makes richer conversations within a team. And often in my life, I've had teams of individuals very like myself. And what happens is that you have a dozen or so individuals agreeing with you and reinforcing your opinion rather than expressing an opinion which is contrary to yours. And the point I made initially about it's not something I thought about in the past, that was a massive blind spot in my part because I wasn't thinking enough about that diversity of thought within a team. And what I really try and do now, and actually former member of my team is here at the back, lovely to see him, but what I try to do is instill a view of difference of opinion is great, and having views from a cross-section of genders, of communities, of class, you have far better opinions to help advise organisations. And the more we've done that, I think our guidance to the business has been far richer and far more beneficial to the organisations. It's been a massive benefit for me, and I think that developing talent from diverse backgrounds as well, you have better people and you retain better talent as well. So it's been a massively important thing for us to achieve as a team.
Perfect. And at any point, anybody, please feel free to interject, raise your hand, and share your view as well. This is what's important. I'd like to come back to my fellow panellists a moment, though, to add some commentary to what Paul believes. Anybody got a view around that? Around why is it so important that we have that?
I'm happy to jump in, and I think I absolutely agree with everything that Paul has said there. There's a really important factor at the moment. We're all very well aware of the difficulties in recruiting people into our organisation, and even more so keeping hold of them. And increasingly, we are seeing people who are looking at the credentials of organisations from a sustainability, from a diversity and inclusion perspective. And if organisations aren't on that journey, and it's about being authentic, it's about being honest, it's about being transparent. Those organisations who've tried to go out there going, oh look, we've set these amazing targets, aren't we great? They're not actually, they're not authentic about it. So it's about organisations starting the journey wherever they are now, looking at how they can make progress, and that's so important to future talent attraction and retention. And just one slight build on something that Paul was saying there about that real importance of having different people. We hear so often in the work that we do from leaders about, well, I have diversity of thought in my team, and that's fantastic. Of course, it's really important, and what Paul's describing is genuine diversity of thought. We were talking before we came in about doing insights profiles, for example, and that's really, really helpful. But if you've got a really homogenous group of people who've got different insights traits, that is not diversity of thought. You are being so narrow in what you're thinking about there in terms of diversity of thought. So I think it's really important that we're really honest about that differential and don't try and con ourselves as organisations that we are more diverse than we actually are.
Good. can I invite Amy or Kalisa to share some thoughts? And just sorry to interrupt before you do, after we've asked them this round of questions, I'm actually going to take a snapshot in the room in terms of where do we feel that our understanding is at the moment, and what we'd like to do at the end is benchmark that. So apologies for interrupting Amy and Kalisa.
No worries. I was thinking that it's very important to have diversity within compliance space. In addition to market integrity and everything like that, compliance is customer focused, and when you have diverse people, you will get a diverse outcome. In terms of our customers, are not all the same. They have different needs, and so it's a good way to be able to service our customers and find solutions to some of the things that some of the issues that customers face when it comes to accessing their finances and money.
I'm sorry to stay with you, Kalisa, for a moment, but I'll be honest, you are an inspiration. You are our first ever D&I champion at the ICA, and that's no mean feat. We are a global organisation. How does that make you feel when you now have that recognition about how important this issue is?
Do you know what? I don't think about it every single day, I have to say. It was lovely. It was absolutely lovely. But I think that there's so much good work out there. Yeah. I'm just one person. I'm trying to do some good. But yeah, it was lovely to be recognised. And I suppose it's a good way to try and inspire other people as well.
Do you charge for selfies and autographs?
No? Do I charge myself as well?
For selfies and autographs? Are we cool to have them at the end?
No, but I might start today. I think I need to.
But you pay your taxes and declare it, right? Because
absolutely. I'll just get one of those QR codes,
I
think, yeah.
Thank you. Amy?
I completely agree with what everybody said. I kind of alluded to it already. In the legal sector, we have recognised a lack of diversity and inclusion within the legal sector. We have got specific objectives to recognise within our businesses where we are. And the reason it's really important in the legal sector is that our judiciary is drawn from members of the legal sector. And we need to have that diversity represented in our access to justice. And if we don't ensure that diversity, then we have a skewed judiciary, which takes us down roads that we might not want to go down.
Yeah. With that, I mentioned a moment ago that what I'd like to do is try and take a snapshot of where we feel we're at as a community. So, utilising our mobile phones, what we're going to do is benchmark the conversation from where we are now to where we're going to take this. So, what I'd like you to, and I'd like you to be honest as well with your feedback, so you can scan that QR code. How confident are you that you understand diversity issues within your workplace? So as you vote, what will happen is we'll bring those results up on the screen and we'll use that as a talking point. So I can see a few people have voted. I'll give it a couple of moments. So live voting is, we are somewhat confident, not very confident being one of the lower, and very confident, still quite low at 17%, which a room of this size. I'd like to maybe say that I'm not surprised, because it's quite a challenging area, isn't it? So, with that in mind, we'll come back to this at the end of the session, but I'd like to put a question to the panel. Again, it's entirely up to you what question you'd like to ask. We've talked about why it's important, but how damaging can it be to an organisation if you're not diverse and inclusive as leaders or as individuals? Who would like to tackle that one?
Shall I jump in first? Because I think the reason we're probably all in the room today is because the first thing that comes to my mind when you ask that question is not how damaging is that to organisations, but how damaging is that to individuals and human beings when we're not treating them as the unique individuals that they are. I'm sure many people in the room will have had their own experiences of what that looks like and what that feels like when you're in a non-inclusive environment, when you experience those non-inclusive behaviours in the workplace. And so that ultimately, of course, then knocks onto the organisation. Of course it does, because you either lose that individual or they're not performing in the way that you would want them to, you would hope them to perform. They're not able to do their roles in the way that you would want them to do. But I think it's always, we're always coming back to thinking about the impact on people at the end of the day. And that's certainly why I'm passionate about this.
Thank you. Paul?
Firstly, really surprising you just shared, by the way. I think that's thrown us all, but so thank you for sharing such news. Look, I think that it's a question about why is it important?
The question was about how can it be detrimental to your organisation?
Okay, so I think there's a few things. One is that it's really difficult to retain talent unless you develop careers, unless you're demonstrating you're inclusive, caring organisation. And I interview quite a few people, and increasingly, certainly a younger generation, this is a topic of interest.
Yeah.
So whether it's gender equality, whether it's racial equality, whether it's looking at disability matters, it's a topic of interest. And often I'm asked, what are my policies, what are the procedures we've got in place? So I think it's really important in order to develop and nurture talent and retain talent within the organisation. Then the point Cleese made before about it definitely benefits an organisation to think about increasingly diverse customer base within the UK. You need to be able to speak to your customer base. I think 15% ethnic minority now, isn't it? You need to be able to speak to that customer base. In order to do that, you need to have the right people to develop your marketing strategy, develop your sales strategy. If you don't have that, the longevity of the organisation looks a challenge, because I think the UK is changing in such a quick way, and it's something all organisations just need to think about. And I think as a compliance profession, if we're not diverse, if we're not inclusive, we're not going to be an attractive and appealing profession to young, talented individuals. Yeah.
So I just want to talk about my experience with that as well, Paul, because I lived and worked in the Middle East for quite a long time. I worked in anti-money laundering, counter-terrorism intelligence, human trafficking, sex trafficking, etc. Now, when I worked in that investigative team, particularly when I applied my Western interpretation of what money laundering is, I'm not going to lie, I was wrong. I thought I knew what money laundering looked like. Now, when I see obviously big piles of cash moving through certain instruments or individuals trying to pay for buildings with gold bars, wrongly, culture, I thought that was wrong. I thought there was money laundering taking place. And actually what I learned as working as part of a diverse team, and this influenced my recruitment when I looked after my intelligence analysts, was naturally there would be a lot of Westerners who would be highly qualified, they've been through professional qualifications, wrongly assumed I thought would be the right fit for the role. But actually what I realised was that as part of a diverse team, to combat crime and money laundering, and if we strip this back, this is stopping terrorism, stopping people being trafficked. The value of having a diverse team was that there was thought, influence, cultural aspects that were brought into this. Now, I'll be the first to admit that that decision that my predecessor had about not recruiting a diverse team probably resulted in money being laundered because of issues that we weren't able to see or issues we couldn't stop. So thinking about, obviously, as leaders in a business, I've seen it on the front line in intelligence, how a diverse, or lack of diverse, should I say, actually had an impact on our ability to combat crime and be a compliant organisation. So I'd be quite keen to hear from the rest of our panel again about why is this so detrimental? And we have got a couple of questions coming in as well, but I'd like to just sort of tackle this bit finally on how detrimental can it be to the organisation. So, Kalisa, Amy, possibly.
I think they talk about the definition of crazy or whatever it is, but in terms of doing the same thing and expecting a different result. If you only have the same thoughts, the same way of doing something, I know if it's not broke, don't fix it. But how do you develop? How do you break down barriers? How do you do things? How do you do things differently? And how do you move with the times as well? If you're not getting in, different people, different experiences, different cultures, and things like that. England is such a diverse country. London is even more diverse. So in order to develop, in my opinion, you've got to keep keep the diversity there, keep different people there, diversity of thought, of experience and things like that, so that you can actually develop, move with the times. Otherwise, where do you go? It becomes a bit of a boring place, I suppose, to work for in terms of a person. But yeah, can you go the distance, the longevity in terms of a business? Yeah, good. Amy, any thoughts to cap that thought?
Just really picking up what Jenny said before about the people experience, the experience that the actual individual has, as opposed to, it's important about attraction and retention. I completely understand that, being an employer myself. But having been in and worked with and know people, that the policies, the structure of the business, the lack of consideration, these kinds of things really caused serious problems for those people, such that a career that they wanted to love, they've not been able to pursue because the lack of these procedures, the lack of this understanding of challenges that people might have just because our policies are just not thought, we've not thought about it. Or alternatively, again, also what Jenny said, is somebody thought it was a good idea to have some policies and so had some without actually, starting where they were, developing why they needed those policies, what they were trying to achieve with them. As compliance professionals, we know a good policy when we see one, don't we? But you can't just buy these things, I don't think, off the shelf and plug them in. That's, I think, some of the things, especially in the legal sector, the focus that they've had in the legal sector about recognising this as an issue and started to do something about it. One of the concerns I always have is about template policies just being plugged in and not actually making a real difference.
Good. And I'm going to talk about some, because we, I think maybe wrongly, associate diversity and inclusion for being certain demographics. I'm going to talk about some in a little while that maybe we don't talk about so much, and challenges that you can't always see or that are obvious. But I would like to tackle some questions that have come through. So thank you to those of you that have put those through. They're anonymous, which is absolutely fine. But the first question that came in, and I'm going to ask a volunteer from our panel, what strategies have you seen work well in the workplace? I like that. It's a good question. Thank you. A tricky question as well, clearly.
I'm happy.
Thanks, Paul.
Happy to give a view. Can I just give you a very quick anecdote?
Please, yeah.
Based on your previous question about the challenges and why it's beneficial. So my background is extremely working class. My parents are Ghanaian immigrants. They grafted really hard. And I then went to grammar school, and I think for 20 years I was so obsessed with assimilation. I wanted my colour to be invisible. I didn't want to talk about my working class background or the fact that my parents grafted, because I just wanted to fit in. And for 20 years, what was actually happening is I was suppressing my own personality, my own skills. Finally, at 38, about 36 actually, I got into an organisation where inclusivity was spoken about, where it's no longer a bad thing to have a working class background. And understanding that about myself, and being in an environment where I could communicate about my experiences totally unleashed new behaviours in me in a really positive way. I became such a better leader. And the award is a recognition of the fact I'm a completely different person, just being honest about myself, my parents, my siblings had challenges as well. And so one of the benefits is unleashing talent in your people just by creating a safe environment where they can genuinely be themselves. If we take nothing away from this session, it's about authenticity. Authenticity is the key to D&I. If you have an authentic environment, authentic leadership, it really unleashes talent in your individuals. And that's just a really practical thing to think about. What was your question, James? I forgot about it.
Well, I'm going to ask another question before that, but I'm going to ask this to the audience. Is anybody else sometimes a little bit scared of just being themselves and authentic? Put my hand up. Yeah. Scary, right? And what an inspiration to hear that actually not only do we feel that, but we know other people that are going through that as well. So back to my question, Paul, which I've also forgotten, so please feel free to help me out. Oh, it was our fellow audience member. What D&I strategies have you seen work well in the workplace?
So a few things, and there's a chap called Chris at the back who may be able to build on this. He was part of Virgin Media too as well. There's a few things. One of the first things we did was do lunch and learns, and this is where individuals spoke about their lives in a really honest way. So you didn't just say, I did GCSE and A-levels, went to degree. No one really cares about that. What motivates you as an individual? What is your personal experience? Initially, we did talk about GCSEs and A-levels, and it was really, really dull. Then we started to talk about mental health challenge, menopause, and people realised, blooming hell, people have challenges. You may have a perception of an individual of being privileged, but when you get to know them, you realise actually, if you actually get to know them, they've had challenges, and by doing that, it demystified challenges, barriers, class. So that was a really good thing. We also did reverse mentoring, so individuals would mentor a senior member of staff, and I experienced that, which was really great. And then we did mentoring and coaching, and which was great. And finally, work experience, enabling individuals to have access to big corporate organisation, to experience what it would be like to work in a big corporate organisation. And me personally, growing up in London, working for a brand like O2 would be like working in Mars, 30 years ago, because it's so alien to me. But by making it just a bit more accessible to the local community, I think that's in some way nurtured talent and retained talent and attracted individuals to our organisation.
I think I saw you, Paul, on a LinkedIn post. Were you outside an internet exchange on a street with some individuals from the Virgin Group at some point?
Probably.
He definitely was. Check his LinkedIn. Evidence is there. But look, so thank you. But I'd like to open that to the rest of the panel as well. And just while the rest of our panel is sharing some thoughts, if anybody in the room would like to share their experience of what they've seen work as well, I would love to come to somebody in the room after we've heard from one or two fellow panellists. So have a think, raise your hand, and I'll get my colleague to bring a microphone over.
I'm happy to jump in.
Thank
so
you.
I think the answer is that there's not one answer, and you have to work out what's right for your organisation. Where are the challenges that you've got? So that first stage is understanding what those challenges are, and there was a reasonable level of confidence in this room. I suspect if you extended that outside into your wider organisation, that level of confidence would probably drop in terms of really understanding that. So understanding what the issues are. Paul, what you've talked about there in terms of talking to people, listening to people is so important as part of that. Also looking, at your policies. Are they right? Are they fit for purpose for your organisation? Really kind of doing that in-depth. I won't use the word audit in a compliance environment. I'll call it review, because that's something we always get pushed back on. But, doing that real in-depth review. And that will then inform the strategies that you need to take. So I'll just pick on one of many that we work with lots of organisations on, but is really, really important at the moment, is around that inclusive leadership piece. So that authenticity with leaders is really important, but they can only be authentic if they have confidence in what they're doing and what they're talking about. And there are so many leaders that want to do the right thing, but feel really out of their comfort zones. And I'm sure there's many leaders in this room who are really deep experts in the kind of technical aspects of your role, and you're used to being an expert in that space. So when you're then stepped into a conversation around diversity and inclusion, that can be absolutely kind of really unnerving, because you're used to being an expert and people are looking at you to be an expert, and yet lots of organisations just put their leaders into that position without investing in that knowledge and that expertise for those leaders. So I think that's a really, really important part of it. And one group of people in particular that do get overlooked often is leaders and HR in the HR space as well. So many HR professionals have had a career that has had very little kind of diversity and inclusion investment in their skills and expertise, and yet again they're looked at to be the kind of guiding light in organisations. So really investing in those skills, I think, is a key strategy and can really help to accelerate the journey that organisations are on.
Great, and that's an interesting point, because the reality is the bulk of a workforce aren't leaders. And the difficulty that I've seen is that while it's challenging as a leader that you're being told this is what you need to talk about and the behaviours you need to demonstrate, but how do I feel when I'm trying to report upwards? Because if I don't say the right things, I'm scared to say the right things, and am I not in line with the behaviours of my manager who's under the pressure? And I feel it sometimes creates this bizarre situation where we all want to talk about it, but we're a little bit nervous because none of us are equipped and we don't understand. And actually, maybe that lunch and learn for me is a key takeaway, because that's tearing down the barriers. Leave your laptop outside, let's have a conversation, let's get to know each other. What are the real challenges that we all face? Because there is not one challenge that fits everybody. I want to, if I may, just come to somebody in the audience, if I can, that might have a view, and then Kalisa and Amy, I'll share with views. But if nobody's comfortable to obviously share things that you might have experienced, not just in the workplace, but in your personal life as well, that you feel has helped you, we'd be delighted if you could share that with us. But again, it's okay if you don't want to share something, but if you can, you could pop your hand up and we can talk about something. Okay, that's okay. It's absolutely, oh, there we go, perfect, thank you. And thank you for being brave talking about this as well.
Sorry, thank you. My name's Reacher. So I think just in terms of strategies, I think what I found is journey sharing. There's nothing as, I think, effective as that I've seen. So people just talking about their experiences. One thing that we kind of put into our organisation is on every month, we have a weekly call. On every call there'd be a sort of D&I slot, and as part of that we ran a series of anyone in the team, whether that be senior or junior, to come and sort of talk about anything they wanted, whether that be a religious holiday, what they did on the weekend, something personal to them, so that we could learn about the team more. And I think senior people kind of starting that off and kick-starting it, and in some respects talking about mental health, and anxiety in terms of certain projects they were running, how they're feeling in the moment, how they've dealt with that. It really opened up conversation and slowly kind of had a trickle-down effect. And I think kind of helped sort of my own personal kind of experience of mental health, and kind of seeing how I could then impact that into helping others that were having those kind of thoughts or anxieties through their daily work. So I think the power of sort of journey sharing and just kind of opening yourself up and being vulnerable, and it takes a lot, but I think that's one thing. And the other sort of strategy that I'd recommend is, if you have a sort of project work or team, having debriefs, or when you have debriefs, to learn any sort of mistakes or what's gone wrong, to have a session about diversity and inclusion within that, talk about whether everyone felt comfortable to speak, what could we improve in that sort of respect, and make sure you're constantly sort of challenging yourself. But that's sort of my experience.
No, amazing, Richa. Now, it's a great answer, and you've spoken about your organisation, but I'm sorry to ask this, but how did it make you feel? Because you're the most important component in that. How did you feel after that?
So I think I felt sort of empowered. So I think I felt empowered to be myself a little bit more, to be vulnerable, and I think empowered and also inspired to say, someone's kind of been vulnerable enough to share something. Maybe I should do that for someone else, because there's someone else I found it really helpful, so someone else might find my experience really helpful. So I think that, and also sometimes on a sort of D&I journey, I think sometimes if you're really passionate about it, it can feel like you're sort of alone. I think others opening up and kind of coming along that journey with you makes it feel like everyone's sort of showing some sort of action and effort, and it could be as small as I said, even telling us about what you did on your weekend, so we know what you like to watch on Netflix, or what you like to do over the weekend, and get to learn about each other more.
See, I knew my Netflix question was important. Thank you so much, Richa. But I want to build on this conversation, because this is a really important topic. Now, Amy, I'm going to come to you. I think you had a microphone prepped and ready because you knew when it was coming. So by background, so Amy and I have been following each other on LinkedIn for ages, the AML community. Everyone knows everyone, but nobody knows anyone because of the pandemic. And Amy took some time off work to go on an expedition of the Camino, a trail in Spain. And we kept backwards and forwards, and Amy's PA messaged me saying, right, Amy's got some time to talk to you. I felt very blessed that she spared some time. And we got talking about AML, and quickly we started talking about the journey that Amy went on, because I had an expedition myself many years ago. And the topic very quickly, maybe it's the northern thing, I'm not sure, we moved on to mental health. Now, the conversation that Richa's just shared with us is a big focus around an element of diversity and inclusion that we can't see. It's like a big grey cloud over us some days. But if I may, can I come to you to talk about your experiences, particularly as a senior female empowering the AML community? Can you share with us some of your experience?
Yeah, of course. So I have had a long journey with my mental health. I am the daughter of a mother who was bipolar, so I was introduced into mental health very early on in my life. We also, as a kid, we lived in the grounds. My dad worked in social care. We lived in the grounds of a home for adults with learning disabilities. My dad was actually really, I'm very proud of him. He's going to watch this because he watches everything that I do. I was really proud of him for starting the kind of conversation we're having about seeing people as individuals, even if they have disabilities. It was absolute outrage. He decided to put a kitchen into the care home so that the residents could make tea and coffee and toast when they wanted, rather than on the timetable that they were given and institutionalised into. So I started off in my adult life very aware of these issues, but I'm a people pleaser. Often children of people with mental health issues are people pleasers. And entering the law with not the best degree, I've already told you. Grafting was taken advantage of, and eventually I landed in a great firm, the firm of my dreams, where I applied as a student, didn't get in, and I grafted for 5 years to try and get recognition. As a people pleaser, I couldn't say no to anything, and that meant I took on work that I couldn't do. was too scared to say anything because I didn't want to affect my future career prospects until I broke. I had 5 months off on the sick, and it was tough. I've got my phone at the back. It was a tough gig because I was terrified my whole life would be over. And just like you, I had to talk about it. I came back and after 5 months, embarrassed, mortified, that I couldn't hack it. And then what happened was there was a procession of people who came and knocked on my door and said, "I'm so glad, Amy." And since then, I never made a secret of it. I'm very, very open about it, even if it's a bit tearful. And that's one of the reasons that I think I'm so passionate. It's a thing that you can't, it's a thing that we say we can't see, but actually we can see it if only we look.
Sometimes it's too late though, isn't it, Amy?
It might be, but it's about thinking about what have we got to put in place to start letting people feel it's safe to say, I can't do that. In the legal sector, we have so many people who are being struck off, who are having their careers ended because they're too scared to say, I can't cope, I need help. And the businesses are not making it a safe place to say, I can't do it. And that's, I think, if I could change anything, it would be that, the safe places.
Now, that initiative that Richa talked to us about a moment ago, that opportunity would have never come out without that safe space, that inclusive environment to be able to have those conversations. And I'm sure afterwards in the networking event, Amy will tell you all about this amazing trip that she went on as well. And LinkedIn was quite inspiring because they documented the journey as well. So Amy, thank you so much for being so candid and honest because it's so difficult. But how inspirational, like nothing else I could say that would replace that. So thank you. I want to just now tackle another question that came in. And I'm going to split this into two questions, if I may, to our fellow panellists. Again, with the respect that we've got a great set of leaders in front of us, but also respectful that not all of us are leaders in the room, and to think about this from two ways. So again, if anybody has a view on any of this, please raise your hand, like Richa, and we'll be delighted for you to share your view. But I'll put the question forward. Do you think a top-down perspective in terms of diversity is imperative to a business success and retention, and how so?
I don't quite understand the question.
So, do you think a top-down perspective, so I think the culture is the theme here, do you think a top-down perspective in terms of diversity is imperative to a business success and retention of its employees?
Sorry, Kalisa, did you want to go?
I was going to say, because one of the strategies that I was going to mention was getting buy-in. I'm not on the Exco, I'm not that senior, and I wasn't within my organisation before. But I got buy-in from somebody that was on the Exco, and she was extremely passionate, and she helped the group get a lot done. And yes, that makes a huge difference, not just in terms of getting things done from a D&I group perspective or committee perspective, but just diversity and inclusion as a whole. If the senior leadership team don't believe in it, don't agree with it, it's what's going to change. I mean, you can create a nice culture within a small team or anything like that, people on the ground, but you won't keep them because then, at what point people want to move up the chain in terms people want to progress. They won't feel comfortable doing that. They won't want to do it, maybe, or they won't get the opportunity. And so things will just stay the same. I really believe that if the leadership team are not involved or they're not passionate, they don't agree with it, they don't want to learn, where do you go as an organisation? But yeah, of course, it's something that everybody should be a part of.
Can I build on that? I do think it's something everyone should be part of the conversation, so it shouldn't just be the people of colour or people who may feel disadvantaged in some way. But tone from the top is utterly integral. Without tone from the top, you can't drive change. Again, I'm talking a very, very quick anecdote, and I didn't notice Richa in the room, actually. I know Richa, and I've worked with Richa in the past, and we did a piece of work for EY. And I spoke to the partner before we did the piece of work, and I said, I want the people who are going to work with us to be diverse, representative of the community. And Richa led that piece of work. She was absolutely brilliant. phenomenally brilliant, really, really good. I'm going to make her gush again, but she's absolutely brilliant. So it's about giving people an opportunity, and leveraging your role as a senior member of staff, or leveraging your brand as a significant organisation to try and drive change. And by doing that, you move from just slogans and nice rhetoric to tangible change. And I'm not saying Reach's progression is down to me at all, but I'm saying that it's so important to give people an opportunity, and to reiterate, Reach is amazing. And we need to make sure that people of colour and females and disabled and people from all sexualities are given that opportunity. Otherwise, you get homogenous leadership, which is not representative of society.
Can I just
Please,
jump in? One of the things that I've spent the last 10 years thinking about is why compliance doesn't work in organisations. That's my whole thing, like build compliance that works. And you can have an understanding what you've got to get done. You can have capacity to do it, enough people to get it done. You can have policies and training. You can have monitoring and auditing and all of that kind of stuff. But if you don't have a culture that supports compliance, the whole thing comes crashing down, no matter how much effort you put into it, time you put into it. And it's some of the things that we've already said. It's about honest conversations. It is about asking, listening, and facilitating people being able to safely have those honest conversations. It is one of the most common things that I recommend to organisations. I don't do it. I'm fairly and squarely in your compliance box, but seeking out support to enable your organisation to have honest conversations about how people feel, because otherwise you're just kind of drinking your own Kool-Aid. You're seeing what you want to see, and people will leave, or worse. From a compliance point of view, they'll stay and won't do the things we need them to do. That's, my compliance bit. I don't mean that. I mean just generally. I don't mean anyone who's we're talking about D&I particularly. I'm talking about the resentment that brings in the organisation, and the disruption that brings if we're not allowing people to have honest conversations, or having influencers who are not challenged. I think that's the other part of it.
I'm not sure how we've only got 6 or 7 minutes left, but that's a testament of good questions. But I want to ask the really, really difficult question last, and this isn't Netflix, I promise. But I'm going to expose myself, and I'm going to raise my hand and say, as a younger white male in the compliance world with everything that's happening in the D&I, I'm a bit scared to talk about it. I'm scared to talk about it because I think I'm a good person and I don't want to offend anyone. And sometimes it can be just cultural ignorance or misunderstanding. So my question, and actually this would be a good point to end on, what's your approach to understanding the perspective of colleagues from different backgrounds? I think some of it lends itself to Reach's initiative around the lunch and learns that we talked about. But how do you approach those conversations about understanding the perspective of colleagues from different backgrounds?
Anyone want to go first?
I'm happy to. So I think that journey of self-education is just so important, and those people who genuinely are authentic about wanting to support change, then they will actively seek that. And there's so many resources out there, because it's not, there are people who are happy to share, and we've heard some brilliant examples of that today, but there are equally people who are not overly confident in sharing. And I'll just highlight the area of gender identity, because we've not touched on that in all the conversations we've had so far today. And we're still a society that is very much built around male or female, and as we know, there are many people who don't fit into those traditional gender identities. And I think we're still in a world, even in some of the most progressive cultures, where actually it's very difficult to talk. If you're somebody who identifies with a different gender or has a fluid gender, it's still very, very difficult to talk about that. So that's an example, I think, that's really relevant at the moment, that we're seeing it's a space where things are starting to move forwards, but it's very embryonic in terms of true inclusion for people from different gender identities. So I think using those resources that are available, there's amazing TED Talks, there's amazing podcasts. There's, I could go on. We can all find them. So I think it's so important to, when you think, actually, I don't know about that. I don't know anybody who I can talk to around that, or maybe there is somebody, but I don't feel, you know, I feel like I need to educate myself. It's kind of looking at where you can do that, where you can challenge yourself. And, you know, instead of sitting down and watching Friends like I do, thinking about, can I use this opportunity to learn something different?
I think gender identity is important as well. It's important to recognise areas that we might have not covered, including, you know, disabilities, and they can include hearing impairments, sight impairments, disabilities we can't see. So I think it's really important that you mention that, Jenny. But Paul, I think you've got some things.
I think it's a really important point. To drive change, you need to create a really safe environment.
Yeah.
And where I work, we've been discussing this topic for maybe 4 or 5 years now. And initially, it was really tough, especially with straight white males. They felt really disenfranchised from the discussion and really uncomfortable about contributing. Either they felt that I haven't got anything to contribute, or they felt I don't get involved because I say something wrong. And that created a lack of change because this massive cohort of individuals didn't feel comfortable to contribute. Lunch and Learns really helped a lot to help to demystify the conversation and engage people in the conversation. We desperately try to create an environment where you can't say anything wrong as long as you're trying to be curious and decent and inquisitive. And by creating that safe environment, you encourage people to participate in the conversation. You respect people's willingness to learn and develop, to be curious. And by doing that, it's taken a while, but by doing that, you engage people in conversation, then you drive change. But you need to do that initial thing first. The worst thing you could do is alienate people and say you're wrong. You're not equipped to be part of the conversation because you don't drive change.
Yeah.
So it's about creating a really, really safe environment where people can share their experiences and be part of the conversation. That's when you get real inclusion, I think.
Yeah, good. Please, thank you.
Hi, my name is Avery. I'm working as a transaction monitor and talking about gender identity. I think to have the right team with diversity will help a lot to understand also the customer. I have one situation where I have a case of possible fraud case, and I receive the documentation from our client. So they onboard this customer, and in one of the documents I have to check was liveness picture and also a passport, where I compared the picture with the passport was completely different. So I didn't know how to approach or how to make the right question because I didn't want it to be discriminate that person, but obviously I wanted also to do my job to make sure that because there was fraud concern that someone was using their bank account, and I just wanted to understand how I could approach that situation, but I didn't have enough support to approach or to go back and query and with a sensitive touch because I didn't want it to be in respect. So I just wanted to see from your experience how to onboard or how to query and make the right, and also to respect the client and the customer, and also to make the checks.
Yeah. So
I don't know if it's
so I'll provide a view on this, and any sort of anti-bullying experts in the room as well, please do. The fact that the client's transgender is a unique data point about that individual. I don't feel there is a discriminatory issue talking to that individual because their financial security is with us, right? So if we, for example, and I'm going to slightly pivot this, but just to I'm going to put men in a vulnerable position with this. Men tend to be victims of romance fraud. And it usually comes after a major event, usually a bereavement of a spouse or a partner or whatever the legal equivalent is in that jurisdiction. And often, men will be afraid to talk about it, to say, this is what's happened to me. However, in experiences that I've had when I've spoken to some of these individuals, when we're protecting their finances, more times than not, they've often said, I would have preferred that conversation to have happened in order to ascertain if that was me or not me. Now, I think the key here is a soft skill. How do you approach that conversation? Now, clearly, if that individual, a transgender, however they might identify, him, her, or they, they will have told us if we're in possession of that identity document. So in fact, we've actually got the mechanisms and the controls. And I will call out HSBC here. What they have actually done is remove gender from some of their application forms. So if you're given a situation where that individual, and I call it a trigger event in the transaction monitoring world, if the circumstances of that position, of that individual have changed, we can ask questions for the well-being and the financial security of that individual. Where I think we might lack is the training to explain it in that manner. And we're kind of put in a situation where make a decision, you've got 10 cases to do today, by the way, don't offend him, her or they in that situation. But I think it's okay to position it right and to protect the financial well-being of that individual What I think it lacks is training how to have those conversations in dealing with it as well. And the reason I use the romance fraud example is it's still an issue. There's a stigma attached to it, and it's having that conversation of being able to approach as well. Now, I'm not generalising, saying it only happens to men. Of course, it happens to women and theirs as well. But it's difficult. But I think I'm going to ask everybody when we sort of leave and go into the networking, because we've only got a minute or two remaining, to think about what you might go away and do when you go back to your society or your place of work, not necessarily as leaders, but as individuals, on how you might approach some of these issues slightly differently. But can I come to a fellow panellist for a few moments?
I think you hit the nail on the head, which is it's about training. It's about having the skills or the knowledge that you need to feel comfortable to have those conversations. One of the interesting things that I've noticed in legal is that people are quite committed to technical training budgets. They're also quite committed to a compliance training budget, but skills training budgets are hard to get. Yeah. Especially in professional services, probably in financial services, you know. You have treating customers fairly. We don't have that really. We do have that's in the best interest, but it's not the same kind of thing in legal. It surprises me. It's one of the things that I still go into law firms and I'm teaching basic 101 type skills that people have never heard before. How do you interact with a hearing impaired client? Don't put a hearing impaired client, don't sit in front of a window with the sun shining in it with somebody who's going to have to rely on lip reading to be able to understand what you're saying. Yeah. This is really basic stuff, but it's not on this training agenda necessarily. And I think it needs to be on there to enable our teams to feel confident to have these conversations. Yeah. Because quite apart from their own personal experience of that, you said it before, everybody wants to do a good job. Yeah. And if we're not given the skills, then we're putting people in really difficult positions that they're not able to cope with. Yeah, thank you. So we've got a minute or two left, and I want to just open the room for any Q&A, so that's a really good start. And while you're thinking about that for a moment, the one thing I would add is when you're thinking about any sort of investigative work, we've got this perception about bias. We pick up a folder, KYC, look at customer due diligence, and we form a view before we've even made a decision. And I've seen examples of this, especially with terrorist financing cases. You pick it up, you look at the demographic, and you assume that you are looking for something bad. Negative news, you read a story, it must be true, so I'm going to find that problem. And that's not the case, right? And again, if we can apply that control. But before we do, we are coming into sort of the last echelons, the last couple of minutes. We started a few minutes late. But anybody else got any questions that they'd like to present to the room? And I'm sure our panellists will be more than happy to tackle questions after this as well. I'm going to turn it back and say thank you, because we talked about education a few moments ago and awareness and exactly what we're here in this room for. So Harriet, thank you for coming and thank you for being prepared to have this conversation and this discussion. So
can I just add quickly?
Yeah, please. Please.
I think it's really important to recognise the resilience that people need to be able to be true allies and advocates in this space. So I think it's it's important to recognise that and to be able to share that and to say, do you know what, sometimes this is flipping hard. Yeah. So thank you.
Any final questions? We're going to come to 20-30 seconds of a wrap up from each panellist. Paul, you can have an exception. You can have 35 seconds. So, again, we'll tackle any questions you like over there. We've got some pizza outside and some drinks, and I hope you stay with us. But, fellow panellists, can I just for your final thoughts before we wrap up? Can't believe an hour has gone already. Can you believe it?
I'm doing 20 seconds
Okay.
to prove the point. I think the key is to be authentic, to be curious, and don't make the assumption that your ethnic minorities or your diverse talents have all the answers, because they don't.
16 seconds, but very powerful words at the same time. Thank you. Jenny?
Crikey, where do you start with a wrap-up on that conversation? So I think, you know, it's about just taking some of the golden nuggets from the conversation today back into your organisation, sharing those with others, starting a conversation on something that you heard this evening that you think, oh, actually, I hadn't thought of that, or that's something that we need to think about. And I completely agree with Amy in terms of, you know, we've touched on it in a number of ways this evening in terms of that training, that education, and just kind of going back into organisations and saying we really need this, and not just for internally, but also looking through that customer lens as well.
Thank you.
I think just touching on the lady's comment, it's a work in progress. No, I don't think anybody, any organisation can say, you know, we are the most diverse, we are the most inclusive, because at that stage you probably are excluding somebody. So it's work every single day. It takes work, and we're constantly learning. Things are not the same. You know, people that we consider. Certain things didn't exist like 10, 20 years ago, put it that way. So the world is always changing, but it's about constantly educating yourself, having conversations, being authentic yourself as well, having the bravery to do that, because it's a start. It encourages someone else to do the same thing. So yeah.
Thank you. Amy?
I'm going to say what everyone else has said, probably. I think it's about being brave. I think it's about being authentic. I try and show up authentic every day, and I do that not just because I have to look in the mirror and know that I do that, but I'm a leader of a team, and I'm a personality, let's put it that way, in my industry. And I think it's really important for people to show the vulnerability and be open about these things, because we won't talk about them if we don't. It makes it easier to talk about it if we do.
Thank you. Can we just give a round of applause for our amazing panellists? Thank you. And I just also want to say thank you as well to the three gentlemen at the back, the media team who work for Wilmington, who have kindly put us up here and hosted us. They are unsung heroes who make this happen, so thank you, gentlemen. And thank you to you all as well. So I'd like to invite you to join us outside for some refreshments and some pizza. Please pick the brains of each other. My challenge to you all is about what you're going to go do when you go back to your places of work or into society and think about an approach that's different. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.